Hey, how's it going, guys? This is subsection 5 of section 2 of supply and demand. And in this one, we're going to take a little bit of an extra step into look at refinement, one that actually worked, one that we can explain to you guys from a refinement perspective, and where we can link it together with some mini structural plays, as well as the idea of mentfx blocks, so you guys can begin to put together a system of your own or begin to understand how exactly refinement can occur. So we're going to look at two specific areas. We're going to look at this one right here, and we're also going to look at this one right here. So let's get up to the 4 hour actually, and take a look at what occurred in this specific area. So as you remember, there are multiple ways to look at structure. Structure can be shown to you by way of larger time frame structure, which is just following the intermediary price action like so, expecting certain things to occur, right? But instead having that changed up on you. So you start expecting new things to occur, right? Of such nature. And that's one way to expect structure. Secondly, structure can be expected by way of impulses with candlestick pullbacks and impulses that leave behind demand zones, which in the future can function as great areas to be a buyer from. And as you remember, we did actually catch this one, and we actually did catch this one, but we're going to take a look at that in a second. Similarly, as a result of this, as we zoom in here, let's take a look at what actually occurred. So structure was being delivered to us, as you all saw just now, with these larger structural points as so. And as they're doing that, we're expecting lower prices to be met. However, as these highs here are met, we start to expect a new type of thing to occur, right? A move into somewhere around here until we see higher prices met again. Now, as we get this, candlestick structure gives us the following, right? So remember, we want to follow candlestick structure with real pullbacks. These right here, not real on this specific time frame, but this pullback right here is relatively real. And as we always talk about, the structure was broken here. As it was broken, we left behind this last candle, right? This last demand zone. So again, let's just play this back to this zone right here. As we broke structure higher from these areas here and these areas here, we left behind structural candlestick formations that left behind demand zones right here. And that's a perfectly valid 4 hour demand zone, the last down move before the up move, that you've now looking for potential buys from to continue to new highs. That is a perfectly valid system that you can pretty much use to trade. Now, similarly, right, as we follow this, we can see that we are actually forming overall larger mentfx blocks that are forming that we can also expect that price wants to hold and go potentially higher from. They can go higher, as you remember, after its validation, which happens right here. And after that validation, we understand that price can go higher from either the open and continue significantly higher, or can come tap to somewhere into the 50% before going higher. In this specific case, notice how the 50% of this overall mentfx block lines up relatively perfectly with this 4 hour determined by candlestick structure that broke structure multiple times demand zone. Therefore, it is what? A higher confluenced area, right? A higher probability chance of price actually wanting to come and mitigate this area for potential bullishness in the future. So again, if we play price here, you'll see it comes, taps into about 50%, just a little bit above, if anything, and continues to new highs. And those new highs are already, as you can see, perfectly profitable entries that held for a while. Now, as you see this occur, you don't have to be interested in this overall area because, again, the RR on this specific large area is not as good. So let's talk about the refinement the way we've been talking about refinement this whole time. Let's jump to a lower time frame and look at this area again. What do you see? Similarly, we have the same down candle. However, at this point, we can now bring it down to this specific one right here. Now, again, this 1 hour demand zone is as valid as that 4 hour one is. Now, the odds of price coming into this area are lower because it's taking into account a smaller, more refined demand zone of the previously larger defined demand zone. So price could come and tap into that open 4 hour, whoops, that was a really bad drawing, this earlier 4 hour open of the demand zone before continuing higher to new structural highs. Otherwise, it could come tap lower into the open of this 1 hour or even the 50% of this 1 hour demand zone and then continue higher. That is perfect refinement, and that is, again, based on the fact that it's within this overall mentfx block. So again, we're not going to use the mentfx block right now because we understand why we're using this overall area. We understand price wants to come mitigate either the open or somewhere around the 50, which is now lining up relatively perfectly with this refined 1 hour demand zone. Now, similarly, your 1 hour demand zone is already valid for you to do something like this. If this is what you want to do, this is again a risk entry. Risk entries for myself don't work as well, but this is perfectly valid for partials against 1 hour highs or something of that sort, and then continuations higher. Now again, if we play this out, you'll notice that price comes down, taps into that area relatively, maybe even the 50%, continues higher to these points. Partials could be taken, and then as you can see, higher prices are then met. Now, similarly, we can continue this process indefinitely until we are happy with our refinement. You have to make a choice to where you want to refine. If you are not happy with how large this area is, similarly, you can either watch for that confirmation, which is what I do, or you can go deeper and look for the perfect refined area where it may tap. So again, we can get to the 15-minute and do the same thing. As we zoom into this area, what do you notice about the overall area we had? Well, we noticed this last down move before the up move. In this specific area, what do you notice? Again, similarly, there is imbalance left behind, aka price action that was not filled in perfectly. So it needs to come back to mitigate those areas, as well as potentially mitigate this inside refined 15-minute demand zone. So again, this 15-minute demand zone is a refinement of the overall 4 hour, of the 1 hour, and now of the 15-minute. And similarly, the chances of price getting here are now lower than getting to that 1 hour or even the 4 hour. However, can still be expected to function as an area where that mitigation can occur. So again, as we get back up to the higher timeframes, let's take a look at that specific area once again. That exists right here. So again, now from looking at a 20 pip stop loss, this has now been changed up to a 8 pip stop loss, right? And that same trade is now, instead of a 1 to 8, is a 1 to 21. But nothing has changed except for the refinement. Now, in this case, you can see that price is getting relatively close to where the actual refinement happened. And again, if we get lower and keep refining this from the 15-minute to maybe the 5-minute or even the 1 minute, we may actually refine to a demand zone that again is valid, but does not get mitigated. So this is the importance of understanding that refinement will come with better RR or potentially better bias that you can establish. However, may keep you out of some potential trades, right? So again, let's continue this until it really fails, because I just want to show you guys how this actually works. Let's go to a 5-minute chart. Now, similarly, what do we have inside that 15-minute? We have this last down move before the up move, right? And that can be your refined demand zone. Now, similarly, let's go back to the 1 hour very quickly and let's play price out. Does price reach this now? So again, similarly, we moved that 1 to 21 now to a 1 to 21 to a 1 to 29 with a 6 pip stop loss instead of an 8 pip. Let's see what price wants to deliver this time. So price comes to that area, and as you can see, we've pretty much refined this to the point where if we continue to refine, would not have been able to most likely catch this specific entry, right? Actually, you can see it tapped perfectly into that open. That's why it tapped though. When we see a tap like this, we're not confused as to why it tapped here, right? A lot of us can say that it's a refine of this 1 hour, which is perfectly valid. Actually, this 1 hour is not the one that got hit at the 50%. Instead, you could also say it was that 15-minute mitigation, or in this specific case, it was that refined 5-minute demand zone, right? And those are all perfectly valid with your ideas of higher time frame structure being delivered, of higher time frame candlestick structure being delivered, right? The breaks above highs and so on and so forth, and overall mentfx blocks delivery, which inside of themselves are forming their own mentfx blocks, right? So this whole down move is its own mentfx block. So even though it became validated and came to mitigate the open, right, a few times, it came to mitigate more of that mentfx block, which was mitigating this overall mentfx block, which came to mitigate the refined demand zones that we had within this denoted gray area, functioning as that 5-minute zone. So let's get rid of this now, as you saw that refinement, and let's look at one more refinement before we wrap up the 5th subsection of this overall thing. So the next area I want to look at is actually this demand zone here. So on the 4 hour, as you see this, we are actually starting to break down in structure again, right? Candlestick structure wise, we were heading bullish and we shifted bearish at that specific break right here. After that specific break and shifting bearish, we are looking from the standpoint of candlestick structure for bearish signs to get potentially involved in bearish plays. Now, similarly, you can take your last up move, this one right here, that is a mentfx block, and you can look for validation of it, which as you can see, if you all remember and watch through every video structurally, this validates it and comes to test it. So actually the test of the mentfx block occurred and we had price deliver us lower. If you wanted to follow those mentfx blocks, right, you can use that. You can see it came to test that quite perfectly. Then it had this, and as you can see, it came to validate it and came to test it quite perfectly, right, and continued lower. So right now we're in a mentfx block kind of bearish bearish setting on specifically the 4 hour. And again, you can follow that to see that happen. Now, again, if you're not sure about where exactly you want to be looking to be a seller from, because as valid as this mentfx block is, and as valid as a trade like this is, you don't know if this trade wants to continue long. And again, you don't want to have such a large stop loss, right? This on its own, to the low it came, is only a 1 to 1.59. On the other hand, just refining it to potentially this 1 hour up move, right, before the down move, maybe even the overall mentfx block. So let's say this one right here that got you into the entry right here, that whole thing, the same down with the same take profit is already a 1 to 3.8 instead of a 1 to 1.6. Now, similarly, if we now refine that overall, so let's get rid of these mentfx blocks, to this last 1 hour up move before the down move, which is your supply zone in this case, before price broke down, right, and started to break structure lower, and continue significantly lower, it came to mitigate that area perfectly. And now that same 1 to 3.89 is actually refined to this open entry here, which in this case has now become a 1 to 1.618, right? Still, that same original 1 to 1.1 has now been refined to a 1 to 6.18. And similarly, we can continue to refine this deeper. Now, how do we do this? Let's go inside this area and take a look at the specific supply zone. And I'm going to show you how sometimes over refining may still keep you out of trades, and sometimes how refining just right can keep you into great trades, okay? So let's get to the 30-minute and take a look inside here. Now, as we get to the 30-minute, what you'll notice is you actually have this refined supply zone within it. And that's a perfectly valid supply zone once again. So that's a refined supply zone within it that you can again expect potential mitigation to occur at. Similarly, as we get to the 15-minute, you'll see this one. So you could refine it to that one as well, just like that. That's perfectly valid as well. We can get lower to the 5-minute. And as we get to the 5-minute and we take a look at this, right, you'll notice that again, you have this up move right here, this down move, or even all the way can be refined to this last up move right here. Right, let's just refine it to this one just for the sake of argument, since we do have some imbalance here. But again, you could refine it if you'd like to this last zone right here, which has not been mitigated. Similarly, as we work lower, maybe to the 4-minute, 3-minute, whatever it may be, 3-minute, nothing really here. Again, you could refine it to this last up move, but as you can see, it actually got validated or invalidated right here with this mitigation. So always be cognizant of the mitigations that are occurring. 4-minute, nothing, maybe the 2-minute as we get lower. What do you notice? Well, now there's actually something new that's presenting itself. So this is why I always talk about timeframes being fractal and not specific to your actual strategy, because they can be used as areas of refinement. So similarly, you have this last up move right here before the down move. And again, you can use this refined area here, but again, what does that do? Lowers the probability of mitigation. So now we can use these two areas potentially, right? As you can see, that whole area was refined to these two. And what you'll notice is that same cell now. So if we go ahead and draw this all the way out, let's exit this replay tool. Let's go back to the 1 hour so we can just work with price here. That same, so as you can see, that's actually the area it hit. This is why multiple refinements are sometimes important, to understand that price can go into multiple areas. But the real up move before the down move, the real supply zone that is valid, that broke down structure, would actually be the one that came from here. So theoretically, this one can become invalid in your opinion. Now, that same 1 to 6.18, which came from this overall supply zone, was now refined to a new one within it with no difference except the refinement to a 1 to 27, right? That same move that moved a 1 to 1.2 on the higher time frame, a 1 to 3 on the lower, a 1 to 6 on the even lower, and now a 1 to 27 on the even lower, all came from nothing more than the refinement of the supply and demand zones that form on the way down or up in a structural play, in a mentfx block play, and so on and so forth. Now, as we take a look at this, you'll notice that even waiting for this confirmation and waiting for the breakdown left behind a new supply zone. As you can see, that was perfectly mitigated and took you down lower, right? Just waiting can get you into this other setup. Now, similarly, you could refine that to this last one, and what you'll notice is that one did not get mitigated. So similarly, as we continue to talk about this over and over again, you need to recognize that just because there's an unmitigated supplier demand zone does not mean, for one, that it will hold, and for two, that it will see any mitigation, because the orders that are resting within these areas exist on a multitude of levels, and you don't know how many orders there really are in there until after the mitigation, which is why when you have multiple potential areas that you refine to, you need to recognize that some are going to hold much less probability than others. And that is how refinement can come from using the mentfx block, structure, and supply and demand zones on either higher time frames all the way down to the lower time frames, with the constant understanding, which is crucial, that not every mitigation needs to take place. So thank you so much, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.